When I think back on all the fears when I was pregnant, all of them dismissed except for one. The only test the state mandated was genetic. Looking for that extra chromosome.
Hello, and welcome to the If We Knew Then podcast. I'm Steven Socks.
And I'm Lori Socks. And today we're celebrating World Down Syndrome Day. And right off the bat, I just want to say, if you're listening to this weeks or months or years later, because you were so busy, you didn't get around to World Down Syndrome Day, it's okay. It's okay. That was one of the hardest, that was like right off the bat. Like
Yeah.
We've
rarely had an episode land on World Down Syndrome Day.
because we're busy and our life is living the story. So I just want to say that I just wanted to say that because that's really what I needed. I just have so many great friends that are such amazing advocates that were so great with the posts and the mismatch.
Oh, they do like a walk.
The walks and the posts and the mismatched socks and all of these really brilliant, beautiful things that lift up our entire community. And I always felt like I was behind the ball. So I never want anybody to feel that way. This year, we just happened to have the space and time and the reminders set, because it's like when you oversleep for something once, you set like more alarms and more alarms and more alarms. And so we had enough, to just be able to put this episode out. But also, it's so important to me that it never makes someone feel bad that they...
If you listen to it on World Down Syndrome Day when it comes out, the week later, a month later, a year later.
Sometime in the future.
Yeah.
Anytime. We're just so thankful that you're listening at all. And we can be a part of the conversation and hopefully your advocacy and hopefully just make your journey a little bit, bring some ease to it. That's always my goal, is to bring some ease. So we were trying to think about what to talk about. And education is something that has been a constant in this journey with Liam. And Liam did a project actually on the right to an education. And one thing that came up in some of his research was just indifference. And, he had to do a project. It was really great because it was a project on a right, but then they also had to say what was the responsibility. And the right was a right to an education. And the question of what was the responsibility, when I sat with Liam, and the right was given to us in 1948, the right to an education. But then he started to go through the timeline, because what I wanted him to do, and it was a bit of a selfish act because it was about inclusion and it was a right to an equal education. And, we're always fighting for the right to an equal education. And in speaking to certain parents, they didn't know what IDEA was, and they don't understand. I guess because this is my journey and this has become my life, I forget that people have no idea what the Individuals with Disability Education Act is. They have no idea that inclusion is not a favor. Inclusion is not a privilege. Inclusion is a right. And I'm still surprised, but there are so many people that just don't even know that. So he was doing this timeline of when do we get our right to an education, and when did it become an inclusive education? And this is like such a interesting, it was such an education for me, because it was all these steps, and I learned so much actually about the journey of the right to an education to becoming an inclusive education. Because also I want to point out that it's not just an inclusive education, although it falls under IDEA, the Individuals with Disability Education Act. It's not just inclusion of individuals with disabilities. It is the access of every student. So IDEA covers every student has the access to the same education. So what's so beautiful about that is that moving forward, people can grow on that. More things, more inclusion. It's born in IDEA. So IDEA, the Individuals with Disability Education Act, is a foundation moving forward for all inclusion. Whereas you go to the first step of inclusion was actually Brown versus the Board of Education in 1954. And what that said is that you weren't allowed to segregate. If they would have never passed that, and you can't segregate because, and this is what inclusion is the opposite of segregation. And this is something that we've brought into our education, our IEPs, because they made this new word that wasn't segregation, and they called it non-inclusive. And that's such a prettier word than segregation. So I just want to encourage you that when you go into your IEP and they're trying to segregate your child to a place away from his peers, and that is not something that you feel because you are the parent, that you feel is a proper setting because they are entitled to an inclusive education with their peers and the supports to access that curriculum. When they're calling it non-inclusive, a non-inclusive classroom, make sure they have that definition correct and it's a segregated classroom. And this is why IDEA was able to really be passed, is because in 1954, that became illegal. Anyway, well, I'll get back to indifference. And indifference, you're so patiently waiting.
No, it's good.
So indifference, we found every step of the way. After that became, which I didn't even know Lyndon Johnson was such an advocate for inclusion. He was a teacher and he was an advocate for inclusion. And he believed in equal education, and he really looked at poverty. So he had a war on poverty, and he knew then in the 1960s that if we all had an equal education, we all had an equal opportunity to a future. I mean, this is the 60s now. Now we're going to the 60s. So he wasn't indifferent. So basically, Liam's project was step by step. Every stop, every law that had to be changed, every court case, every time someone saw that it was wrong, they saw that you can't just educate people differently based upon how much money they have, the color of their skin, their cognitive ability. You can't take people who have a different cognitive ability and segregate them and not provide them. They have to be in the public schools. You can't just put them in the public schools. You have to educate them while they are there. And then beautiful, beautiful Judy Heumann in 1977 leading a sit-in for 504, where not only do they have to, they have a right to an education, but they also have the right to the supports they need to access their curriculum. And all of these beautiful, beautiful advocates who changed every time. And that was what I said to Liam. What is different? What is different? We got that right to an education in 1948, but why? Why did we have to keep fighting? Why did it have to keep changing? And it had to keep changing because every time we saw that it wasn't including everyone. It is a human fundamental right. And that was a really great, interesting thing to learn. For those of you who already know what that means, it is a human fundamental right, the right to an education. But it wasn't, and the human right is for everyone. But there were some really brave people who didn't just sit back and say, yeah, it's for everyone. It's written right there.
Well, it's a lot of brave people that it probably the way it was going wasn't really affecting them in a negative way in their mind. I mean, of course you want a classroom to be, we know the advantage of having a classroom that is inclusive, but the way the laws were going in 1948 was working for the majority of people.
Right.
It takes people that aren't affected to help a minority group. Mm-hmm. A group that strictly, when I say minority, is just less population.
Marginalized.
Yeah, they're marginalized, but they're less a population. So they need help. They need a voice. It's our job to do that as advocates.
And that's it. People made it different because they weren't indifferent to the injustice that existed, right?
Mm-hmm.
And And I see I see too much lately of indifference. If it doesn't touch me, then it's not my business. But if it touches another human and it hurts them, it's everybody's business. And I don't know what it takes before people understand that. You are not immune. That attitude of that it's okay for somebody else to be hurt. It's okay for people to actively try to inhibit others' potential. It's just wrong, you know? And I say this like as far as indifference goes, like when you're looking at education, and this is what we saw. This is what we saw in our fight for an education was indifference. Like Carpenter Community Charter, not an inclusive institution, and it took me a really long time. I don't necessarily like to give energy into things that are negative, but it took me a really long time to actually state the fact that this is a school that actively segregates individuals with disabilities, and not only segregates, but denies them their education. And it has to be said, right? So we knew that he was being denied his supports, but nobody would say anything because nobody wanted to get in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
I even had a teacher one time in an inclusion meeting, and we started to talk about IEPs, and she was like, I can't talk about this. I feel like
I need to step away.
I need to step away because I feel like this is like a legal thing. And it's just like, wow. We're talking about inclusion.
Talk about how we educate kids.
She didn't want to talk about inclusion.
Yeah.
She didn't want to talk about, what she didn't want to talk about was non-inclusion.
Right.
And the lack of segregation and the non-implementation of IEPs.
There's examples all through history of people that have stayed quiet when they see an injustice, or just step aside and allow it to continue and walk away. And there's a lot of examples too of people that have that intention, but then, wow, it starts affecting them. And it's like that whole saying of like, first they came for this and then they came for me. I mean, that's how we've seen this roll through history. But we did have the one resource teacher. Yeah.
But for years she was our resource teacher, and we would push her, and we would question, and we never stopped advocating, and it wasn't popular, and it wasn't appreciated or liked, but that was our son, and we were made to think that was wrong. We were made to think so many times that like our want for our child to have equal rights is wrong. That's what people will have you think, but it's not. And this one teacher for years, and we'd always go. I was always at the school. Well, where's his supports for this? Where's his supports for that? And then finally, at an IEP, and wasn't this pre-COVID?
Yeah,
this was pre-COVID, and we're in a room, and I'm like, he is not getting his supports. I know he's not getting his supports. I want to see that. I asked for the logs.
Mm-hmm. The hourly logs.
The service logs.
Yep.
And they tried to shuffle around it because the first time I asked for the logs, I saw that there were services that were just dropped and they didn't tell me. It's against the law, people. And you could tell she was sitting there, and she couldn't take it anymore. And she just said it. She was like, no, I have not given Liam his services. Some ridiculous amount of hours that had not been serviced. But she made the difference because she stopped being indifferent to it.
I know her as an educator, and I believe that she started on her education journey with intention on helping children. And it can be difficult sometimes when you're trying to do the right thing and your employer, the educational department, is tying your hands. I'm just going to say that, making it difficult for you to do it, and you want to continue in your job, and financially you need to work. She, luckily for us, she was at the end of her career, ready to retire, and I think she kind of, like you said, had enough. She was like, I'm just going to tell the truth that they probably had a meeting beforehand and had all this discussion before we got there to the IEP, and probably,
the room shifted. You remember that though? Like everybody was like, "What have you done?"
She was like, "Wait." It was almost like, we talked about this. We're not gonna, disclose this information. But she just was like, "Hey, yeah, you're right. these hours don't match. We have been failing your son. And there was nothing that could be done at that point, but that's because she spoke and we recorded it.
But it felt good and bad at the same time.
It was
was good and
hard.
bad.
It was multiple reasons. To me, it felt bad because I knew she was in a tight spot. But part of me felt bad because I saw it kind of like when the veil gets ripped off of something and you go, oh gosh, I was right.
Yeah, I think
They
that
were
was it.
kind of covering up these.
You know, like when you
injustices.
get lied to, and then someone tells you the truth, and you're like, "Thank you for telling me the truth," but it's like,
Gosh, I was right all along. Haha.
but you know how?
oh.
But we also had a really brilliant OT person, and she was always getting in trouble because she would be like, "No, this is what he needs, and this is what." She always she was the one who was on our side when they denied him his right to an education, and they were trying to shuffle him off to someplace else, and she was like, "No, that is not the place for him."
That was great.
And she was not indifferent. She was, she made a difference because she stood up for what she knew was right. And
being
it wasn't easy. And we knew it wasn't
that's
easy.
my point. If you're not indifferent and you're going to talk about it and say, hey, this doesn't seem cool, guys, you're putting yourself on the line. And that's what makes indifference so easy for humans. It is an easy way out. To just turn your head and look away, and everything's gonna keep going, and I just gotta push this to the side and know that okay, this is a smooth road ahead for me. When you start speaking up for somebody, the road could get bumpy for you.
In different ways, but smooth in others.
Yes,
Right?
in the long run, we're helping everyone by calling out injustices.
And I feel like this is how I feel like I see a lot of indifference right now. And like just in my everyday, there's so much like I don't care. There's so much, like even in a parking garage, there's like 7 different instances. And then you know what happens? And then it gets to the point where I'm like, and then that's how you become indifferent. That's how you're just like, oh my gosh, I can't even. But I see so much indifference. And that is the problem. And I actually had to start I'm going to be that person. I'm going to be that person that speaks up because I've seen just if someone hurts someone in front of me and says something hurtful and nobody wants to get involved, I look at a person who's had their feelings hurt. You can say it's none of my business. And that's usually what the person who said the nasty thing will tell me. It's none of my business. And that used to stop me. Yeah, you're right. It's none of my business. It's none of my business. But it is my business. Because if you said it loud enough for me to hear you, then you made it my business. And if you've hurt someone in front of me, you've made it my business. And I will not be indifferent to the pain of another person, even if it means walking up to the person and saying, hey, that's not yours. That's that person's stuff. Even if it just means showing empathy to the human who feels sad or feels alone because they've been hurt in a room full of people. And we have a really good friend that is so brilliant because I don't have this skill, but he can use comedy to just do, and not in like a passive aggressive comedy thing. Like he's really smart. And I remember one time I was in a room and someone used the R word in front of me. And this was when Liam was really, really young. And he couldn't even walk yet. So he's like working so hard to learn to do these things. And this person used the R word in front of me and I was taken aback. And I remember I didn't know what to say. Inside, I started to crumble. Other people heard it. Nobody said a word. And I was working and I couldn't move. And when I was finally able to get out of that situation, I crumbled. But nobody, people excused the behavior. Oh, that's just that guy, or that's just who he is. Nobody showed me empathy. Yeah, I know. He's just like that. But my friend was just like, no, man, you know what you say? You go, hey. Easy on the R word. And I was just like, oh my God, I wish I had that. I wish I could have done that. I wish I had that skill. I use it now. It's totally Tishon Shannon, I love you. That was Tishon. It was his compassion, him being empathetic and understanding. Like it's not his road.
No, right.
He doesn't have a child with Down syndrome, but he saw the pain that it caused me and he helped me. And even if it wasn't such a brilliant thing to say, because he did teach me that I didn't have to own what was being put on me. I didn't have to own what was behind that word or the weight of it, that I felt that way. I didn't have to own that. I didn't have to carry it. But because he saw me and he saw that it hurt, he didn't excuse it. And it helped me heal. And that's what, Mr. Rogers says, find the helpers. And the helpers,
Yes.
yeah, the helpers,
Oh
the
my
helpers,
gosh,
right? There's always going to be helpers. And that's what you were saying earlier. You were like, this isn't just about, it's World Down Syndrome Day, so it's a celebration. So it's not just about people who are indifferent and how wrong indifference is, but it's celebrating the people on our path who have chosen not to be indifferent and who've helped us. Because now that we're here, the next however many years is every step in front of us is still new and is still unknown. But the ones behind us, coming through that was all new, that we were just figuring it out. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And it was brand new. Now we at least have a few reference points on certain things. Like there's still going to be new occurrences, but I feel like a lot of those have the same foundation. There's the unknown, there's the challenges, there's the voice that tells you no. Sometimes, there's those things, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Right? That's like did it take you by surprise the first time it happened? When someone's...
Oh, yeah, totally.
When someone's told you your infant son could do nothing, and I'm like, but he's like not even at his birth date.
What are we talking here? Yes,
he was like pre-birth date. He was like, he was like,
that's right. He was like due in April,
and he was
born in February,
and it was just like it was even
he
before
he was supposed to be out yet.
It was.
And we're already telling you what he's not going to do.
Yeah.
Well, no, he's like pretty much a champ right now.
He's literally out and ahead of the game because he's right. But it surprised us. It was very surprising that just because your child had an extra chromosome, that people thought that they knew who he was or what he was going to be.
Yeah, they already had that mapped out. They had like his whole life mapped out. And I think that's what caused such a rift when we got into the education system, because they did the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And we aren't talking about, indifference in like the people that, I guess wouldn't technically be in our community, but that's not all of it either. Like indifference can come within the community too. So, we do have to keep in mind that it's not just these other people. I mean, it's us. We have to make sure we're always advocating for ourselves and for others.
I think I know.
The only reason I brought that up is because I feel like when his life was mapped out, it wasn't just others telling us that his life, like what he was going to do. Like a lot of our community had gone with it.
Well, because now we're going to do deep digs, but you have to think about where that's like a systemic thing where we're told. I always go back to the Industrial Revolution, but that's when this whole mess started. Mm-hmm. That's when they felt like our children didn't have a value.
Most
right?
Definitely, yeah. And we don't, and we don't have to go.
No, we won't go. We don't do Industrial Revolution, but you're right. It's the stories that were being fed in a time like that's what I'm saying. Like when you first had a doctor tell you that your child wasn't going to be anything, you were shocked because doctors don't say those things. And when you first had a teacher say your child didn't belong in their classroom, I mean, that's not something that's supposed to happen. When you first found out that somebody thought that your child was there just for socialization, not for an education,
Yeah,
it
the looks
surprised
we
you.
got in kindergarten when he showed up to class the first day, and other parents looked around like, "Wait, is this the right class? Is my kid in the right classroom? Why is that kid going in there?"
Because they were like, why is he in this class? Why
Oh,
is my
is this
son
the
in
wrong
that
classroom?
class?
Yes.
They were all like, my son, they all thought their child was in the wrong class because Liam was there.
I know.
Not all the whole class, but the
No,
five
the
parents
people that reacted that
that
way.
were so bold. They were
Yeah.
so bold. A fun fact that they did say, what am I supposed to tell my children about your child? And they didn't have really, a couple of them did come up and say that to me, but some of them first asked the teacher that. And I was just so bothered. I said, tell them it's not contagious.
That's right.
I was so mad. I'm like, you
Yeah.
have Google. Don't
Yeah, right.
come
Like,
on.
what, really?
Really?
You
No,
don't
that's
know?
not what you're asking me. But yeah,
Right.
no, I think that when you look within the community, and especially if you're looking at people who have older children, you know, it's hard because that's what they were told and they believed them. And the
And the indifference perpetuated it.
yeah, and they just trusted. And so it was a different kind of indifference. It was like, I guess that's what I'm supposed to do.
Mm-hmm,
Like, how many people do we know that just, I think we were really gifted with a few really mean people out of the gate that I was just like, that's so off the charts that I cannot not question it.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? And because it was so like, it wasn't
Yeah.
subtle at all, that made us question. And then we started to find these places and we started to find these helpers that, remember the first woman who said, it's about inclusive, not, what's the one, mainstream.
right.
Remember?
Who was that?
It was the teacher at that one school. And she was like, no. That's not
TK?
that. And we were using the wrong word. And she was like, if you say mainstream,
That's right.
if mainstream is what your child needs because it's your decision and you know your child and you know that's best for them, then that's great.
But mainstream doesn't mean
Inclusion.
right.
Mainstream is like PE and lunch and art, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
It's where they see that your child should be put into the classroom, and it's not very often curriculum based. And that was a helper. And when we found that out, we were like, what? And as soon as we sat in our first IEP, they were like, well, we can put them in a non-inclusive classroom and just mainstream them. And we just knew that was the wrong word. We just knew. And we were like, no, we want inclusive because someone told us inclusion. We've been indifferent at times because we're just like, I can't. And it's not about, and if you want to call it, I guess we're calling everything as it is. Like, yeah, I can say that I've just been like, I know, I see it, but I can't do that today. Right. But that's my choice. I know that's because self-preservation or because we're going to choose a focus. Like how many times do we go into an IEP and go, all right, we're going to be indifferent about that because we got to choose.
Yeah.
We have to choose what we're fighting for.
Mm-hmm.
We have to choose. And we've had that conversation before that it's really crummy that it would have to be a choice. But yeah. And I think you're right that like that happens within the community because the changes in our story are new. Like this is pretty new, right? Like he went to an elementary school that was around for 100 years and he was the fourth kid with Down syndrome that ever attended, and the other three were there at the same time. So that's how new that is.
Part of Liam's project was how new all of this is because he was saying, "Oh, my grandpa was born when 1948 when
the right to an education,
right." So this is all
and it took
a generation away. You know,
it took
people that are it's now people experienced from the beginning are still alive.
It took 42 years for it to become inclusive, like for every student. That's how long it took.
And
so
we're
it's
still working.
so it's still really, and even though that right is there and it is his right to an inclusive with the supports and all of that. It's still really new. It's still really new because individuals have to understand like the difference between what Liam's ability and needs are than, any other student. And a lot of times because they don't have experience with Down syndrome, which I think is the real challenge, like inclusion is new. So have they experienced a student with Down syndrome? That's a really great question. That's like my question. The last two resource teachers Liam's had, that's been my first question out of the gate. And it's not to be angry or condescending or any of those like negatives. It's because I want to know what you know about my child's ability. Because if all you know is stereotypes, then you know nothing. Because think about the stereotypes that are propagated. And that gives me, now I can't tell you if I would have asked that 10 years ago, if it wouldn't have been like, now that's just so I can understand who you are. Like I can understand how you're going to limit my child. Now I look at it to say, okay, well, this is, if you've never had experience, this is my son, this is what he's able to do. And these are the supports he needs. And then we have that conversation and then I continue. I never drop that string. I just continue it, right? So because today's a celebration, I want to bring it back to just instead of focusing on the challenges that do exist, and we can focus on those tomorrow, but just celebrating the helpers that have helped us and guided us down this path, or given us that word at the last minute when we're going to our IEP, or held our hand so we could squeeze it under the table and they wouldn't see our emotion. They wouldn't see us. We could have like a strong front, just those friends who have no idea what we deal with on a daily basis and the challenges, but they love us and stood by us.
And those teachers that stuck their neck out and and would call it as it was, in the face of their peers and their employers. And it's not easy.
No, not to be political, but look at the state of the nation right now when it comes to education and when it comes to disability. This is the time really that we have to make sure that we have those conversations and we're using the right words and we're bringing our helpers with us, that we are believing in our students and our children, and we're knowing what they need, and we're understanding that IDEA is still the law and that our children deserve an equal education. People fought really hard for that. Judy Heumann being one of my most favorite, one of the most beautiful advocates that, disability rights has had. People fought really hard. Those helpers.
Yeah. And some of this is going to, cost money. And when you think of budgets and expenditures, it's investing, though. It's investing in our community as a whole. It's not wasteful spending. It's not something that should be restricted because we're trying to cut budgets or anything. This is something that we're investing in. Do it right. Do it sensibly. Spend the money in the right ways.
It's something that for 42 years, people fought and made changes to get it right. And a lot of the people who did it were just allies on our side. And a lot of the people who did it alongside us were allies, making the changes, because what we did know is that this right to an education is for everyone, and it's nothing if it's not equal for everyone. Right. And that was one of the things that struck me about Liam's brilliant project, was that the language wasn't just written for individuals with disability. It was to lay that groundwork that it's for everyone. Every single human deserves the right to the same education. with the supports to access their curriculum. And
It's really beautiful.
it's really beautiful because I've oftentimes felt alone on this journey when fighting for Liam's education. And sitting with Liam doing this amazing project on inclusion was awesome, because it wasn't just the right to an education, then Brown versus the Board of Education, and then IDEA, which originally had a different name, and then they changed the name, which was really good. It was all these other steps along the way, all these other helpers. And that made me feel really good because I knew I wasn't alone. And I mean, I know I'm not alone, but I knew that I wasn't just the one parent at the end of the table with this random idea that my son deserved an equal education and that the work needed to be done to give him his supports, and that was the law. It was something that I was just standing on the shoulders of all the people that thought the same thing.
It's a long line of advocates to get to the point that we're at now. And we're part of that lineage. That's something to be proud of.
Yeah, so today on World Down Syndrome Day, I want to celebrate this beautiful path that we've been on and our beautiful son. And man, it's amazing. It's so amazing. Despite the challenges that every life has, it's such a gift. I mean, it has been such a gift to parent this smart, funny, hardworking, kind, empathetic. Liam is never indifferent.
No.
He is never indifferent.
He will stand up for you.
He will stand up for you.
He will go to you and comfort you.
Yes.
He will make a difference. He won't stand by and just let something roll.
And he really taught me that. Like he really, really taught me. It's not just words. It's like, it's a part of me now.
That's the indifference lesson we're learning from him.
Yeah.
Just how we can live our lives making a difference. And that stand in the middle, you think stand in the middle, you're not. You're not. You need to actively help someone. Have empathy for them. Understand that, okay, it's not affecting you right in this second, but it's affecting somebody. And if it's in a negative way, we should call it out. And it was all those little call-outs that caused the progression of laws being changed and rights being held.
Mm-hmm. The world needs more of Liam in it. The world needs more of him, and it needs more of what he offers to the world and society. His love, his kindness, his smarts, his hard work. I mean, everything about him when he did that project, and we'll bring it back to the project, is that he did a million things that they said he never would. And he just busted down all those imaginary boundaries, all those imaginary walls. He just knocked them right down. And he didn't do it because he set out to do it. He did it because that's who he is. And I just think the world needs more of that. He did it with kindness, and he did it with empathy, and he did it with all those things, passion and hard work and determination, all those things that make him him. That's what we celebrate today.
Yeah.
That's what we celebrate because, you know, we're part of the conversation now. We're part of the knowing. We're part of the understanding. And by witnessing that beautiful human, by being able to observe and take part, any part in that journey, man, what a gift.
Happy World Down Syndrome Day.
Happy World Down Syndrome Day. Thank you, Liam.
Please follow us on Twitter at If We Knew Then Pod, and you can drop us a line on our Facebook page at If We Knew Then Pod, or visit our website, ifweknewthen.com, to send us an email with questions and comments. And you can join our mailing list there and get alerts of future podcast episodes. All these links will be added to this episode's show notes. Thank you again, and we look forward to you joining us on the next episode of If We Knew Then.
Come and